I'm going to first of all introduce John Nelms with Duke Energy. John's a Senior Economic Development Manager. He supports the recruitment, expansion of businesses in the company's service area. One of the largest nation's utilities, Duke Energy. He's facilitated development of traditional industries such as textiles and furniture, as well as others, such as biomanufacturing, data centers. They've emerged more recently. John joined the Duke team by way of Progress Energy's economic development staff, where he worked since 2005. His career has also included experience with the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources, North Carolina Department of Commerce, Greater Rowley Chamber of Commerce. In addition, he has provided voluntary service to the North Carolina Economic Development Association. He's currently Vice President of the North Carolina Economic Development Association on boards of the North Carolina Rural Center, North Carolina Southeast. So holds a BA in Business Management from NC State and an MBA from Cagle. So John, platform's yours, and I understand you're going to eventually introduce Michael after we talk a little bit about Duke Energy.
Yes, thank you. Wanted to take the opportunity before we got into our panel discussion to talk about our economic development program at Duke Energy. But our focus of our economic development program is to, we focus on industrial development primarily to create low growth for our company, but also for our communities, investment and jobs for our communities we serve. We support economic development in a number of ways. We support our state, regional, and local economic development programs in the territories we serve. We also aid our local communities with product development and marketing, which I'll touch on a little bit later. We work very closely with our local and state economic development partners when responding to requests for information and on projects as they visit the area, where we can bring to light the benefits of Duke Energy and how we can serve different industries, and also how we can provide reliable and cost-effective electricity. We're basically at the table to package the energy value for each project and be the voice at the negotiating table. Our economic development program is built on three pillars: site readiness, business recruitment, and economic development. And I'll touch on those individually. Our site readiness program has been around since 2005. On an annual basis, we put out a solicitation for sites to our local economic development partners, trying to identify new sites. And when I say new sites, sites that have not been state certified, sites that have not had a lot of study done to them. And from the solicitations we get, we evaluate typically 10 to 12 sites a year, where we bring in a national site consultant and also work with an engineering land use planning firm to evaluate the sites and give the community feedback and a roadmap as to how to get the site ready for economic development. This program has been highly successful. We've, since 2005, this program has led to $8.3 billion in new capital investment for our communities and over 12,000 new jobs. We also have a drone pilot on site. And as many of you know, in the world of COVID and doing business in COVID, virtual site visits versus on the ground site visits have become the norm rather than the exception. So having a drone pilot on site, on staff, allows us to give another service to our communities and help them be more prepared for projects. We also have a business recruitment team that works across the United States to identify and pursue qualified economic development opportunities. There's a 5-member team. They are divided into target markets: automotive transportation, aerospace, battery manufacturing, chemicals, data centers, food and beverage, manufacturing, headquarters, life sciences, logistics, medical marijuana and CBD, semiconductors, and steel and metals. And our team, they not only call on companies, they call on site consultants and other contractors and vendors that work across these industries to generate leads for our 6-state footprint. Our economic development team, which I'm a member of, we provide electrical expertise, response, and manage projects and help our state and local partners close deals. As you're going to find out in the panel discussion coming forward, economic development is the ultimate team sport. It requires collaboration between local, regional, and state economic development organizations to win projects and bring capital investment and jobs to the communities we serve. To tie it all together, our economic development program provides company and community benefits. Our company benefit is we help drive new revenue for our company, but more importantly, the community impact, helping our communities create jobs and capital investment. 2020, our team was a part of $9.1 billion in capital investment enterprise-wide and approximately 1,000 new jobs. That wraps up my remarks, and I'm now going to turn it over to Michael Haley, Executive Director with Wake County Economic Development. Michael is a recent award winner of North Carolina Economic Developer of the Year, and he's going to lead a panel discussion in Project Galaxy, which Duke Energy was proud to be a partner of. Michael?
Well, thanks, John, and appreciate the intro, and you stole one of my lines that I was going to use to kick us off, and I was going to say, in describing economic development as a team sport, and that's certainly what we're going to talk a lot about today. And it's important through John's comments. I hope that the folks in the call today fully appreciate the role that Duke Energy plays in economic development in North Carolina. They're a partner when it comes, obviously, to infrastructure, but also a partner when it comes to things like site development, product development. Those are important aspects of economic development. You can't sell from an empty wagon. We say it all the time. I see Ashley Cagle smiling when I say it, but you have to understand that that's an important aspect, and Duke's been a great partner. And John, thank you for your partnership and all you've done for us over the years. So again, we've got a great panel today, everybody. Excited to be here. Again, my name is Michael Haley. John, thanks for the introduction. We've literally got 3 of the best economic developers in North Carolina on our call today, and I'm really excited to jump into the conversation. I'll do a brief introduction of our speakers just to give you a sense of who's going to be on the call with us, and then we'll jump right into our conversation. First is Ashley Cagle. Ashley's one of my colleagues at Wake County Economic Development. She's our Assistant Executive Director, and Ashley leads all of our comprehensive business expansion, recruitment, and relocation efforts across information technology, life sciences, clean tech, and advanced manufacturing. Ashley also oversees our talent attraction and talent retention and pipeline efforts. You can't have one without the other in modern economic development. You have to have the talent to be able to drive company and recruitment and economic development. So Ashley, thanks for joining us today. Next is Irena Krstanovic. Irena is an awesome partner of ours here in Wake County. She leads economic development for the town of Holly Springs. Irena, I was reading your bio again, and it's saying here it's a post you've held since 2016. It seems like yesterday, but also that you've been there forever. And that's it's awesome. Irena's been here in Holly Springs with us since 2000 when she first started. And Irena is a veteran when it comes to life science recruitment, both with Novartis vaccines and then what we're going to talk about today with Fujifilm Diosynth Biotechnologies. It's important to note that project, Fujifilm, is the largest capital investment project in North Carolina history, and in large measure is here because of Irena's leadership. And finally, we have Dr. Laura Rowley, who's the Director of Life Science Economic Development for the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. For those that don't know, the North Carolina Biotechnology Center is one of the key resources for our economic development efforts when it comes to life sciences. They're one of the gold standard resources that we have here in North Carolina and are recognized around the world for the work they do to help drive life sciences here in North Carolina. And in Laura's role as Director of Life Science Economic Development, she partners with economic developers across North Carolina, as well as the universities and community college system to support life science companies. Previously, Laura worked as a as a faculty entrepreneur at UNC Chapel Hill. So that gives her a lot of added experience when it comes to how to best support life science companies and communities as they want to attract and grow their life science ecosystem. So I'm going to jump into the presentation if we could. Ashley, we're going to talk today about Project Galaxy as we've known it, but this is Fujifilm Diosynth. Again, as I mentioned in my introductory comments for Irena, this is one of the largest economic development projects in North Carolina history and one of the most important. And we're really excited about that. And there's a lot to get into for sure. But I was hoping before we do that, you could give us like a quick overview, a 10,000 foot overview of the project itself before we get into the little more specifics about the project and how it came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So this project was, I'll call it interesting from the beginning. In economic development, there tends to be somewhat of a formula that gets followed with a lot of these projects, and this one broke the mold from the beginning. It's we should have known that it would be an exciting ride. Interestingly enough, this project came to us initially through an engineering company who was working with them, and that's because speed to market was such a critical driver for them, that the site evaluation, the physical land took priority in this site search. So we started in that way. We got on the phone with Irena. We called up John Nelms, who, I think every time we call, he may pause for a second to think, am I answering this or not answering this? We knew that this was going to be a really big undertaking, and that's because the company was talking about an investment like you don't see very often, maybe once in your lifetime as an economic developer, maybe never at all. And that's a $2 billion investment, a facility that from the beginning they were calling the largest. There were several terms thrown around. We landed on the largest in North America, though I think they have said largest in the world. We'll see. But 725 jobs, really high paying salaries. So we knew we had our work cut out for us. So I'd say speed to market was really the initial driver for this project. But really the layers became so much more complicated, interesting, and a great opportunity for us to really show off. One of those drivers being the ability to recruit a workforce, to train a workforce, and also sustainability. This is one of the first projects that we've had that really pushed us hard on sustainability. They want to be a world-class facility, and they wanted a location that would partner with them in their endeavors. And so these are things that we typically talk about, especially on the workforce side, but this whole sustainability notion was somewhat different and new for us because we were being asked to actually demonstrate, lay out, and help them create partnerships. And I think those are the things that ultimately pushed us over the finish line with this project. I wanted to just mention the partners on this project. I think it's really important as we're talking about economic development, as a team sport and a collaboration. And there's so many partners on this project that I had to go back to the press release to be able to read them off. But I think this will set us up really nicely for our conversation today. So partnering with us on this was the Department of Commerce, the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, the General Assembly, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Environmental Quality, the Community College System, of course, the Biotech Center, Duke Energy, the UNC system, NC State, North Carolina Central University, Duke University, the Japan Center, Capital Area Workforce Board, Wake Tech Community College, of course, the town of Holly Springs, Wake County Economic Development, and the Rowley Chamber. So all of those people had a role in making sure that this project was successful. And honestly, that is the norm. It is a team sport. It takes a lot of us to be able to pull these things off, especially a project of this magnitude.
Yeah, it's interesting, Ashley. You know, one of the points that you make, and it's sort of a good transition, Irena, when we're talking about partnership and partnerships critical in economic development, and you form those partnerships over a long period of time and working together in a lot of unique and different ways. And that's sort of my transition here is to talk a little bit about the history of Holly Springs. You know, you don't just decide to be a life science community overnight. It takes a lot of work. And that's something that the work is something that Holly Springs has certainly put in, and really over a decade, maybe close to a decade and a half, right, Irena? And so I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit on this call, not only about sort of the decision about like why Holly Springs wanted to be a life science hub, like a life science community, but also how that decision came about, and then what did you do because of it? And I'm thinking here with particular importance around things around the infrastructure, around electricity, water, wastewater, gray water, things like that the town really focused on when it came to sort of the horizontal infrastructure that had to be in place to really meet its goal of being a life science community.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. I'm excited to be here with such a great panel and team that we worked on the Project Galaxy. Absolutely. I think it was an interesting thing. The first, one of the first sessions I had with the Holly Springs Chamber after the announcement, the question that was posed to me was, how long did it take? How long did it take for this project to be, come to the public eye? And it really made me think, I believe that Ashley said RFP that we received from, it was maybe early October of last year. And the announcement was made on March 18th. So really about 6 months. But that's how long it took for this project to, get to the public eye. But as you just mentioned, preparation from the town of Holly Springs started way, before then. Probably about, maybe a decade or even 2 decades ago. I believe it was in the early 2000s when the town of Holly Springs made that strategic decision to position our town to be a destination for the life science in our state. And I knew, and I remember some people being very, skeptic about it. Like, why would you think, you can recruit, such a large companies to your small community? But I think the reasoning that we had in mind was, let's leverage our geographical position and, how close we are to, being a part of the, RP region and being close to RTP and the resources, universities, everything that we have here. So we have hired actually a consulting firm to confirm our, beliefs, and it did come very favorable for the town. At that time, there was also the Department of Commerce just started the program with the site certification. And if you believe that, that taught us a lot. I do even, I was thinking as preparing for this, presentation that, John, I believe that you were one of the first people on that committee that was assessing sites exactly from that standpoint, from the utilities and, how do we find and identify those sites and these, business park that could potentially recruit to put ourselves in the position that we can provide that speed to market that the companies are looking for. So that was, site certification was definitely how we started to prepare our, at that time, Holly Springs Business Park, where we were very lucky to 4 years after, we recruited the Novartis vaccines, today Securus. And then, very soon after that, we realized we were out of land, to go further. But to my point is that, it was very easy. There was a lot of education, Michael, that had to be done. And it's really the understanding. We had several meetings with the biotech center, even, in the early 2000s, trying to really understand the needs of the industry. And I think that is a key as you're trying to prepare your community and your sites to be competitive for such a large projects. I believe that, in the site certification application, there was one checkpoint that you would have, as the community have to be able to provide 300,000 gallons a day you had to have that access capacity to be able to even apply for the site certification. Again, that's 300,000, gallons a day. Just to put it in perspective, Project Galaxy will be using about 1 million gallons a day. And with those future phases, they asked the town, will we be able to handle 2 million gallons a day? So that just tells you about the infrastructure need that these companies of this size actually have. So to be in the position to, to be competitive, it is not just that you need to have a site that works, you need to have the access capacity of your infrastructure in place, talking about the wastewater, talking about the water, and something that in this scenario played a really good role, a good favor for us was such a robust system of the groundwater that Holly Springs has in place. And again, that was something that in the, I would say maybe in 2008, 2010, our engineering department has pushed really hard to do and to get a favor in the community to make an investment into the gray water, which that allows us is to save about 12 to 15% of the potable water daily. But at the same time, it was a very important aspect in the sustainability efforts for Project Galaxy during the recruitment time. And Ashley did mention that it was one of the key drivers for their, decision-making process as well. And it also provides them with a lower price, per, it's probably about a half price of the potable water. So, that systematic approach to educating even our town staff, town leaders, and then going all the way to the mayor and the town council, I think it was a crucial to this, a process of positioning us to the, to be competitive for a project of this size. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to work hand in hand with your partners and have a lot of patience, and you need to have a lot of belief that it can happen. So in this case, I think we are out with the best case scenario, of course, and we are very proud that we were able to secure, Fujifilm Dias and Biotechnologies in Holly Springs.
Irena, I love the story of the long road and the consistency with which Holly Springs has addressed this desire to be a life science community, and it is a life science community. Certainly today, one of the leading life science communities, not only in North Carolina, but in the country. Laura, it's sort of an interesting as well, in terms of this long road that Irena has described for us. That's what the Biotechnology Center has done for North Carolina. It's sort of helped North Carolina position itself, focus its message around biotechnology and life sciences. But maybe a little bit from you, sort of a similar type of question, but how is the Biotechnology Center itself prepared to help a company like Fujifilm Dias with this very large type of project? But also, how is it within the context of that question, how are you preparing communities when it comes to not just workforce and things like that, but also when it comes to the necessary, as we heard Irena talk about, all the necessary infrastructure that's not like an add-on. Those are critical elements to these types of projects.
Now, that's a great question. And I think that as I was listening to Irena's response, I was reflecting on when do you start that clock of how long you were preparing? Because there's so much that goes into it. And I'm thinking, well, we were founded in 1984. Should I just start it then? Is that when I say we started preparing for something like this? But I think, in all seriousness, we've heard a lot of talk about relationships, and I think that can't be overstated. And I know whenever I first started in the life science economic development arena, but Irena is who I was thinking of. I knew that Holly Springs was a location, a place that I needed to know. And I saw Irena at an event, and I sought her out and I said, hello, I'm Laura. I need to know you, because I understood how much their community was really seeking to continue to drive life sciences, and those types of partnerships are paramount. So I think that just can't be overstated, that relationship piece. But I think that in terms of the other things that the Biotech Center has been doing, we do have this focus on understanding the needs that we're hearing from those prospective companies that are assessing communities in North Carolina for life science expansions, but also understanding our existing life sciences industry. And this is formal, it's informal. I think formally, we're looking at our ecosystem through initiatives like our Window on the Workplace study, where we take a closer look at our current biopharma manufacturing employment in North Carolina, our employers, what trends are we seeing? Is our training infrastructure meeting their expectations? We commissioned a report on wastewater to understand where different communities are at with that. I see Ashley squeaking in a smile because she's part of that as well. And then again, informally through all of these conversations that we have all of the time with developers, service providers, so thankful to be able to lean on folks like John to tell me about all the things I don't know, like in the energy sector, local communities, the relationships we build with Holly Springs, with Wake County Economic Development. And I think that it's not just about encouraging the relationships with the biotech center, it's also encouraging all of these partners, especially in the life sciences arena, to interact with one another. And we see these relationships translate into collaborations that directly demonstrate for prospective companies the partnership mentality that we see in our community. And I think a great example of this from the last year is that the Community Colleges Bio Network, they found a platform that was great for virtual career fairs in response to COVID. And then they opened it up not only to multiple community colleges, but to students from Bright at NC Central and BTech at NC and ECU. And then this in turn allowed for not only more students for them to connect with potential jobs, but it was a one-stop platform for employers to connect with students with specialized training from multiple institutions. And I think that that's just that partnership, that collaboration, we hear it over and over again. It seems intuitive, but we hear from companies that that's not what they see everywhere. And I think that it's not a secret, but I think it is something that sets us apart. And then I think finally, it's around communication. And we've been putting increasingly more focus on how to best communicate and then clearly package the most relevant resources for a given project. I have the pleasure of thinking about life sciences all day, every day. And so we're going to treat a company that's manufacturing gene therapy different than one that's doing a diagnostic test for oncology. Even though on a surface level, folks might say, don't they all need scientists? Isn't it the same? We focus in on how to best package those most relevant resources to make it as easy as possible for those companies to envision how they could just easily plug in.
That's awesome, Laura. I think that sort of it gives that the understanding for folks, sort of the depth of knowledge that the Biotech Center brings to these projects, but also sort of the array of questions that we receive from these questions. Maybe a transition. It's interesting, Ashley. I'd love to get your insight along with Irena on this question, but it's interesting when Irena said this was a 6-month process, and at times it felt like it was 6 years, and other times it felt like it was 6 days in terms of like how time occurs on some of these projects. But speaking of some of those questions, maybe Ashley, you go first, and Irena, I'd love for you to sort of close out this question. But talk a little bit about some of those key challenges that this type of project sort of brought up, and then quickly how we were able to address those key challenges. I think it's important for this audience to know.
Yeah, so as I was kind of mentioning in my comments earlier, this was a project with a lot of layers. And one of those first layers was that this was an international search. So a lot of the news around the project ultimately was our competition with Texas for the project. But that's not the way it started out. It started out as an international search for the company. There were multiple U.S. states also involved, and then many sites within those states involved. And one of our first hurdles that we had to clear was the company making the decision to do this project in the U.S. So locally, we were faced with the challenge of how much do we put on the table, knowing that we've got a ways to go, but also understanding how important it is to demonstrate that this is where they could and should do this project. So that was our first real challenge. And we were fortunate in Wake County that at the time we had 2 sites that were sort of in the running, but also other counties near us, Durham County and Lee County, were also in consideration. And so figuring out that balance was sort of our first challenge. As we went along, it was more apparent that we at this time being the Holly Springs site, would be competing directly with College Station, Texas. The company owned an asset there. They have a footprint there. They've been making investments and expansions there. Their roots run deep in Texas. They run deep in the Triangle. The Triangle is their North American headquarters. So competing against Texas can be challenging. They put a lot of incentives on the table and have a tendency to really fluff up packages for companies, and they drive a really hard bargain. I mean, they are a tough competitor for a reason. Texas wins a lot for a reason. So the company did something very unique, and it's actually something I think we wish all projects would do, where they really sort of boiled down everything that was being offered by both locations and did their best to make an apples to apples comparison between the 2 sites. So we found ourselves, with not as much sort of cash on the table, and sort of different assets and strength, but also some challenges that we had to address because of the way that they were making the comparison. And that's where we really dug in on workforce and sustainability. And all the while, the town of Holly Springs is like the little engine that could in the background or the foreground, however you want to look at it, making sure the site was perfect. John was clearing major hurdles with the utilities, with the electric infrastructure extension. So all of these things were running in parallel. We knew that the site could work, but it's never just that easy, like Irena was explaining. And then there were these other things that we felt like might really make a difference for us, and they did, like workforce, sustainability, the biotech center's expertise. And so I would say one of the challenges was really understanding how they were viewing what was on the table for them in other locations, how we responded, and then how we rose above each one of those to show that we were the better.
Agreed. Irena, sort of a similar question. Thanks for that, Ashley. I love the background and information. But Irena, some thoughts from you around sort of what some of those key challenges were. And I know, again, a project of this magnitude, there's challenges throughout, but would love to hear a little bit more from your perspective, some of those challenges, and then how the town and how the partners overcame those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a great summary on Ashley's side. She's absolutely right. I think there was during that 6 months period, there was like one day when I felt it was kind of quiet for me, at least from the standpoint of, constant questions asking, meetings happening, sometimes to the very late in the evening. And I believe that same evening, Ashley called me and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been in the meetings with them all day long." And I said, "Oh, so they just moved to you today." So we were kind of laughing about it, but it was definitely a very high intense process. And as you can imagine, that's one of the largest the largest investment for North Carolina, at least that we know of. And you can, then imagine that the team that was working on the Fuji side and the responsibility that they had in the form to present it to their team, what is being offered from each side and each state and each site. Now, I think for me, for the most, the challenging part was certainly the site test fittings. As as Ashley mentioned, there were like several ways to approach that from their standpoint, and those have changed throughout the process. They had, something in mind, and then they were looking at, design that they already had in place. So they were trying to place it on the existing site and how will that, fit as well. So kind of we were working hand in hand with them, with our professional staff at the town as well. So that was kind of all happening while the incentive package and negotiations was happening kind of on the side parallel with this process as well. It taught us a lot. One thing that is challenging at the times is you're looking at the phase one of the project. That's the $2 billion project. The company itself is looking further. They're looking, okay, if this is the site that we choose, can we grow at this site? And they're looking, phase two, phase three. Of course, at this point, we cannot be counting on that. All we know and what we are working with is what we have, and that's the phase one and the numbers that we were given, while the company is looking further down the road, which is very normal from that standpoint. I think the biggest challenge for us was that, we had a major connector road planned through that site. And when some of the design standards have changed, they called us one day, and I believe they pretty much said to us, this road needs to be moved. If we cannot move this road from our site, we will not be able to build on this site. And if you know anything about the local government, that is not an easy task to do, because these roads are on these books for a reason. And they've been planning for many years. We were able to find a very attractive solution to that and move it to a close proximity of the site. And we were able to solve the problem, the challenge at the time. It was not that easy. Now it all sounds like pretty easy and, smooth and done. But believe me, during that time, there was a lot of uncertainty and there was a lot of work with our town officials. And I have to give them a lot of credit, because we have been meeting with them every Tuesday of the month since, in the closed session since December, when we started to get really serious about this project, all the way to the announcement date. So again, there was a lot of players, a lot of partnership, a lot of discussions around this to bring it, to pull it to the finish line.
It's Irena, those conversations in particular around some of the challenges, the road and things like that. It has been interesting because, for a lot of people maybe on this call and other people that we have the chance to speak with, some of those things for some, they seem to be in the background, but those become very front of mind issues when you're talking about a project of this scale. And again, you're talking about, fitting in on a piece of property with, and those things become really important, that, like you said, became a key driver for this decision at the end. And Laura, maybe to turn to you, some of these things, obviously key drivers on this project included finding the right spot, right? Workforce and talent are always the key driver when it comes to projects of this type, when they're looking for, highly skilled, highly trained life science professionals. Proximity to peer companies is important. That's why we have such a large life science cluster here in the Research Triangle region, is companies like to be around other like companies for a host of reasons related to innovation and other things. But from your perspective, maybe expand on the needs of some of those, some general needs of life science companies that you've seen across, not only here in the Triangle, but across the state. And also maybe following in on Irena's commentary, a little more about some of those needs for our local communities when it comes to infrastructure. So from a company perspective, what are some drivers? And then from a local community perspective, some of those, how do you then meet those companies where they are when it comes to infrastructure development?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it can seem like, for those that are kind of casually viewing, that life sciences is all of a sudden booming in North Carolina, but it has been a pretty steady growth, especially in the biopharma manufacturing subsector of life sciences that Fujifilm is in, really over the last 20 years or so. But I think that what made this project a little unique was its scale. A lot of the projects that we've seen come in are more on the scale of maybe 200 new employees and, $100 million investment, which of course is nothing to sneeze at. And I think that because we've had so much experience with these companies, we've built up a lot of what they're looking for. You mentioned talent, and in some ways I was thinking, well, Mike already described all of these things, all the things that are important, but really talent is exceedingly important for life science companies. And it's in part because this one word is carrying a really heavy load. It includes how many folks are coming out of your colleges and universities. We do boast about how many biological and biomedical and engineering graduates come out of our universities in part of our pitch, but that's just one part of what is talent for these companies. There's also about your specialized training infrastructure. Great that you've got a biology program. Great that you have biomedical engineering, chemistry, but very few communities in the US, maybe even the world, have an aseptic training suite, bioprocessing equipment, industry experience faculty. And where we are in North Carolina, we have multiple organizations and multiple locations boasting these resources. And I think that really is something that sets us apart and is a differentiator. There's also the range of how you're using these tools. It's not just, here are new graduates that are trained in this way, come hire them. There is that, then there's certificates, associates, bachelor's, master's, PhD programs that are all actually quite specialized. But there's also a partner at the ready to upskill your existing workforce. So whenever you're adding a new product line or trying out a new technology, you have experienced and knowledgeable training partners. They're like, oh, we can develop a new course for that. We be on our advisory board. We'll make sure our students that are graduating out, that they know it, but also we can help you to upskill your employees. And I think that is another thing that's really meaningful and fits under that big talent umbrella. And I think, that specialization also turns to knowing the difference of is it a gene therapy, a vaccine, a pill, and what set of resources. So not just throwing the whole book at them, but saying you're going to want to tap into this, here, that, there, and making that known and providing that guidance. And I think that we've talked so much about it being a team sport, but that coordination and collaboration that is another piece that is really, really a key part of what makes us a good place for the life science industry. And being industry facing, understanding their timelines, their needs, what is unique, and not just throwing it all into one bucket. I think when you start to talk their language, you start to see a little bit of responsiveness. And I think that, you see that on the flip side, the other part of your question, how can communities be prepared? It's leveraging resources like the Biotech Center, nurturing your partnerships with your community college, and not just in the general sense, but for life sciences, knowing, in Wake County, the Capstone Center is phenomenal, understanding what the BioWorks certificate is and how that plays in, what types of roles that would be relevant for. That is all part of what makes it work. And I think that the other point you made about the clustering, helping them understand how they can connect. We have a lot of companies here, but if you just have a lot of companies, but you don't know how to actually talk to the other site leaders, understand how did you overcome this permitting hurdle? It doesn't do you much good, but we have things like the Biotech Manufacturers Forum that brings together site leadership regularly. And I think that whenever prospective companies look at this, they think, oh yeah, I worked with them whenever I was in my prior role. I remember them from my time in this location, and that is really meaningful as well. And I think that ultimately, once you get out of talent, speed is the other thing that really, really presses on timelines. And it's, what I think makes Holly Springs and Wake County so exciting to work with, because they fully appreciate and understand what those timelines need to look like, how to talk about it with clarity, with transparency, so there's no surprises on the tail end of, wait a second, you said this permit would take this long, it's taking that long. And I think for those local partners, for folks in the service providing side of things, it's understanding what you have and clearly communicating it, because it's when you have that misalignment that you have disappointment that affects not only that current project, but when they're going to come back. Because we also have folks that they helped land one project here, now they're with another company, had a good experience with that first project, and they're helping in that next company think about North Carolina. So it works great whenever they have a positive experience, but if they see things that are misrepresented, it can also kind of bite us. So I think that those are just a few of the things that I think set us apart and that help this project, and that are drivers for companies, and with that, things that communities really need to be keeping in mind.
Laura, I think some of the things you said here, and Ashley, I'm going to turn to you for this next question, but you mentioned things around being industry facing. Obviously, that's something that the Biotech Center does really well, and this region does really well. The notion of clustering, And then it's not just about, like you said, it's not just about location, but it's about location plus the collaboration that comes along with location. And then you talked about this idea, this notion of sort of the quick start. Oh, here's something you need. We can work together to do it in partnership. And Ashley, sort of my question to you with that lead in is, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was the push for sustainability from this company, but we're also hearing it from a number of other life science companies. And so I'd like to sort of, using Laura's sort of points as a starter, maybe a little bit about how this has changed over the last several months in terms of sustainability becoming a higher priority, but also in regards to how are we as a community responding to that type of request. Ashley, I'd love to sort of hear a little bit about that. I think it's important for this audience.
Well, we learned a lot of that through this process. I may not have had the best answer prior to this project, which I have this project to thank for that, because it really helped to educate us more on sort of our state's views on sustainability, on our county, the town. There's obviously been a lot of talk about sort of sustainability, and that's a big word. That's a buzzword. It means a lot of different things. Duke Energy has talked a lot about sustainability and their commitment to that and partnering with companies. But it really wasn't until Fujifilm came along that we found ourselves working with a company that was making really big sustainability goals and commitments. And as we learned from our partners at NC State, not only were they making big lofty goals and these commitments, they also have a governance structure in place which holds them accountable for the things that they say that they want to do, which is really interesting, because as all companies tend to attach themselves to the latest buzzword or trend, to see sort of this governance structure attached to it, and what that means for us in terms of our ability to deliver on a solid partnership, or in this case, the words we use constantly were sort of the roadmap to sustainability. We said that probably 1,000 times. The roadmap to sustainability. But that's because they had very clear goals. So, when I was reading the partners, I talked about the Department of Environmental Quality, for example, knowing that the state would partner with the company to achieve their goals. NC State wrote a whole plan about sustainability and working with this company, and it's even evolved beyond the initial proposal, where NC State is working with them on their facility design to make sure that they are thinking about things maybe they had never considered before, or really just being smart about the decisions that they're making. And so that's interesting, because they were already pretty sophisticated in their choices around sustainability to begin with. But once they got here, got into North Carolina and into Wake County, and we started unpacking this, they realized, oh, it could even be more. So that was really exciting for us. I think that was a big win, and definitely represented a turning point in this project. And those questions haven't stopped. I referenced Fujifilm in terms of, the one that was sort of the most intense or allowed us to learn the most. But every project that we have right now that's really active, that's really considering our location for their location, is asking questions about sustainability. They're talking about their goals. They're maybe saying for the first time, we want some goals. We heard that you helped Fujifilm with that. Can you help us with that too? And the answer is yes, though we've got a lot of work to do in that space. But what I learned through all of this, and the answer to your question, is we have laid a really good foundation to be able to do that. And so that is really sort of the next evolution in economic development for us, is how we help those companies achieve those goals that they want.
Ashley, I think it's important. I think the sustainability questions that have been asked, not only of Fujifilm, Dyson, but many other companies that I know the folks on our team have been working with, Irena and Laura and John and others, are going to continue to sort of drive a lot of this response, drive a lot of unique partnerships and things like that. And one of the questions, I know we've got about 9 minutes or so left, so I'm going to ask the three of you the same question, maybe a rapid fire question before we wrap up. We've talked a lot about some of the technical aspects of the project and looking back and things like that. But one of the fun parts of any sort of important moment in your working career are the things you take away from it. So I'd love to get, Irena, I'll start with you, and love to hear from each of you sort of what your favorite moment of this project was and what it's meant to you. And we'll do a quick rapid fire on that before we close out today.
That's a great question, Michael. And I think for me, probably my favorite moment of this project has nothing to do with the project itself. It actually has to do with the relationships and the fun that we had throughout this whole process. You know, I think Laura said that the relationship cannot be overstated, how important it all is. And we knew that. But I think that going through this process of the recruitment really just even more emphasized what we were talking about and what Laura just shared, truly working together hand in hand and being able to overcome every challenge that was, thrown in front of us through this process. Was definitely my favorite part. Just that whole dynamic of the project that was so exciting that I think we got, we all, worked through the holidays and just kind of going, taking every day at a time and looking at whatever was, in front of us. How can we overcome it? Can we think outside of the box? And I do believe that everything about this project is outside of the box thinking. I've really seen my colleagues that I work with, in the just the most awesome light that I could see, and I can only, wish that for any economic development to have such a good partners to be able to make this happen. As you said, looking on the surface, there is a very logical place for a company like this to be in North Carolina, but going through that process from the very beginning. And when you dig deeper, there is a lot of reasons that you can really not even identify why they would pick community, Wake County, and the North Carolina as their location. And I really have to, I do believe that, working with a team that can make it happen is just a really, big blessing that I've experienced throughout this process.
That is great, Irena. I love it. I love that's an important takeaway is relationships. Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think it's funny, Irena, when you speak to working over holidays and things like that. And on the surface, that can people may be listening and saying, well, that doesn't sound like fun at all. And maybe in the moment, it's not always fun. But in the end, when relationships and friendships are strengthened, that's important. So thank you for saying that. So Laura, same question. What's one of those? What's your sort of moment of takeaway or from this project and the work that you did on it?
Well, I think following up on Irena's, I will say my now almost 7-month-old daughter did make a cameo in one of our weekend meetings as we were trying to pull things together. I'm like, it's the weekend, y'all. She's here too. But I think truthfully, I think it's still to come. As wonderful as it was to hear Governor Cooper announce that Fujifilm had selected Holly Springs, all of the conversations that we have had since announcement have me just thrilled about building this relationship between Fujifilm and Holly Springs and bringing to life everything that was proposed.
I love that. I love it. I think it's important. We often talk about Wake County as a community of what's next, and Laura, your comments really sort of epitomize that. That notion of what's next is always very exciting. Ashley, I'll let you close out before I give some takeaways. But what's your sort of favorite moment from this project?
Well, Irena and Laura gave great answers. So I'll second that and also say what they really wanted to say, which was when we won, period. That's my favorite part. And theirs too.
I agree. I think everyone agrees that was a wonderful moment, and the ability to sort of have a successful conclusion to the amazing amount of work. Folks on the call, it's hard for me in our remaining 3 minutes to describe the amount of work that these three economic developers did on this project. When they say they gave up nights and weekends and holidays, that's not hyperbole. That is literally the truth. Working over the Christmas holiday break, New Year's Eve, every weekend. That is true for 6 months. And so we're real fortunate in our community to have leaders like this that are making our community better every day. A couple of quick things, maybe some takeaways for our audience that I heard today that I think is important when it comes to not only this project, economic development broadly. So three quick takeaways as we finish our time together. One, I hope you heard a lot about partnership today, and it's at the local, the state, the education level, our utility partners like Duke. Partnerships are what make economic development work, and what makes economic development work fun. And so those are two important things. Partnerships matter in this work. Two, sustainability. This notion of sustainability, Ashley mentioned it, Irena mentioned it, and Laura mentioned it, as well as John. Sustainability is becoming more and more a top of mind, first level, primary level driver for economic development projects. So the work that you all are doing in partnership with our local communities, with other local partners around sustainability truly does matter. Those investments matter. That's really important. And those investments matter to my third takeaway, which is this is the long game. Irena does such a great job of talking about Holly Springs making these long-term investments. Laura talked about the long-term investments since 1984, the role the biotech centers played to build out this cluster. That's what we did with this project. It was investments made over a long period of time, and keeping those investments a priority to be a life science community. That was what led to this project locating in Holly Springs. Again, partnerships are great. John, thank you for your continued partnership. Thank you for Duke's partnership and leadership in economic development, not only here in Wake County, but across North Carolina, across the entire footprint. And so with that, David, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you so much to our great panelists. It's always great to talk about a wonderful project. And thanks for the opportunity to share this great news with the community.
Thank you, Michael. Well done. And John, you've been pretty quiet. How about if we give you a moment to reflect on what you've heard and just simply comment on Duke Energy's perspective on the partnership and the project result that we have here?
Yeah, point I'd like to make too is about the site itself. The site itself used to be part of the Harris nuclear plant property. And we worked with Holly Springs and a private developer over a several-year period to make that site available and to get that in the hands of a private developer so it could get to this point. But this project was just, as they said, a matter of, it was just, the epitome of collaboration. I wanted to interject that last question that Michael asked the panelists, their favorite part of the project. I can tell you without question, the favorite part of the project for me is when my contact at our transmission department called me and told me we could make the deadline. I was having a few sleepless nights up until that point, and that is absolutely that was the best part of the project for me.
Well, John, it's great to hear. We heard earlier in the program from, I think it was Ryan Nance. He indicated that energy has moved up from about number 7 or 8 to about number 3 now on the hierarchy of development priorities. And I think and I hope that you're going to be experiencing more of that.